All right, so it is time to develop our contour a little bit further. So we are going to start with those eyebrows like I mentioned, and I'm going to start with the one that's not in the shadow. So I am looking in box F5 to start. So F5. Okay, so that's where that eyebrow shape starts. So again, I'm using my eyes to look at how much space that eyebrow takes up and where it comes in and out of each square. So I like to look in these sections a lot to see where does it cross, how much space does it take up, and where does it transfer into the next box. All right, so that looks to be about correct. Maybe a little bit too much there, but that's okay. All right, so now I'm looking at that left side. So I'm gonna move my photo, and that starts in F4. And I am gonna kind of mark in this distinct shadow line. So this is kind of the next step, is you can start to really kind of put in pronounced shapes and shadows. So even though it might not be a distinct feature, those shadows are going to be really important. So I'm going to put in the makings of this kind of eye shadow over here because it kind of connects to the eyebrow, so it is important to kind of start from there. And this eyebrow basically goes all the way to that highlight that we talked about that was on the side of his face. So again, you are looking for those big shapes. And we're starting to develop a little bit more detail in them as we go. All right. All right, so zooming out, you can see it matching up a little bit more. All right, so now I'm going to probably come down to my nose area and get that in. Now again, like we talked about before, when you think about contour, you are looking for lines and shapes. We are not worried about drawing a physical nose, drawing a nostril. We are literally looking for where things start and stop. Okay, so I know that his nose basically comes right to here. Okay, and so I'm going to draw that tip in, the tip of his nose, and then it curves over to this side. And then it comes in, and then it comes back out. So I'm looking at, there's like kind of that darker black shape and then a gray shape, and then it curves back out. And now I'm going to that other side. If you ever have issues where you would like to see your photo without the grid on it, you can always go back into Photoshop and just turn off the eyeball, or you can re-download your photo, or it still might be in your downloads on your computer. So that is possible if you'd like to look at the photo without the grid, because sometimes it can kind of, those grid lines can be like right where you're looking, and you might want a little bit more information. Now I think I've made this side of his nose a little bit too wide, so I'm going to adjust that. All right, there we go. That's a little better. All right, I'm going to zoom out. Oh, I think it needs to be straighter. I think I've angled this too much. So you definitely do need to kind of double check yourself a little bit more as we are working on those more important and distinctive facial features. Even the slightest change and bit of directionality can really hinder what if your celebrity actually looks like your celebrity or not. All right, so this looks a little awkward, but I promise this will make more sense when we start to shade. Having these kind of starting and stopping points for where that shadow is going to be really important for you and me when we actually go to take our ebony pencil and start shading. Okay, so I am going to look over down here to kind of address the mouth and then the ear, and then we'll come back to the eyes because the eyes do need a little bit more detail. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on that mouth area again. All right, and then I'm coming over here. And let's see, it looks like, I'm going to double check, I'm an I and J. Okay, so he doesn't have much upper lip showing because of his mustache. Let's see here, am I in the right spot? I am, but I need to come upward on an angle more. So I'm kind of drawing in that darker shadow area, and it's okay if you like slightly shade it in. Just do not press very hard because you'll make it harder for your pencil later on. And this is one of those instances where I might want to access the original photo of my Chris Evans, so that I can make sure that everything is in the right spot. But I'm doing okay without it. All right, so for that bottom lip, comes over here. And lips are tricky. They can be very misleading. So at the very least, you want to make sure that you've gotten the main shape down. All right, and then we will address the rest later with shading. And I know it doesn't really quite seem like my best work right now, but I promise you that as we go, as we develop, it will make more sense. But I am going to trim this down a little bit. I think I was a little too wide with my bottom lip. All right, I'm looking at the kind of goatee area, making sure that still looks okay. There's this shadow over on this side. Okay. All right, so I'm going to come over here to the ear. And since we already have our lines, I won't need my grid nearly as much, or at least the letters and the numbers, that is. So I'm drawing in this curve here, letting that come down, but I'm also drawing in that shadow that comes in here, and you can even shade that in a little bit. Again, I'm not pressing hard at all, so if I do any sort of shading, it is very subtle and almost just like a bookmark for later on. So same thing with this area in here. All right, and that's probably about all the information I need for right now in that ear. I'm going to go ahead and slide over to the other side and see if there's anything I missed. I do need to draw in that kind of highlight and shadow spot super quick. It's just this curve right here. And I think, let's see. Yeah, this is all beard, so it kind of covers his ear. So that's really all that shows, which is fine. Okay. All right, so what you've all been waiting for is we're going to go ahead and go into the eyes. And you can double check. Some of you might have more details that you need to put in and whatnot. Don't worry about the hair at all. We're just leaving that as a hairline for right now. If you have any severe wrinkles or anything like that, you're going to want to put those in. So I do have a few that I will put in, but unless you have a really distinct wrinkle, don't worry about that right now. All right, I'm going to start with this left eye because it's nice and boxed in by this shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm starting with that crease. So the crease in the eyelid, because that's a nice distinct line that I can kind of follow. And I really have to be careful with shape and curvature here. And then also like how much space the eye takes up and where it starts and stops. Then I'm going to come in here and draw like the tear duct area. And then the eye sneaks down into this lower section here. Okay, and then I'm going to come back up where the eyelashes are, where that dark, you're going to probably have a pretty dark area where the eyelashes kind of overlap. Remember, we don't draw eyelashes, we draw what we see. So in this case, it would be that shaded black area, but we will do that with our shading pencil later on. All right, so before I do that, mark in that black space, I am going to put in my pupil, my iris. So I'm looking carefully. And I'm making sure it stays pretty rounded. All right, and then I've got that darker area there. I'm not going to add too much detail yet, because I will do that with my shading pencil. But I am going to start blocking in some of that black area. From the eye. So eyes are very telling. They withhold a lot of people's kind of personality and all right, so I'm just marking that in so I just don't forget that that is nice and dark over here as well. All right, so I have one eye done. Now I'm going to switch to the other side. All right, I'm really got to check my angle on this one too. So I'm really just focused on this box and where things come out and in from. Now this is where you might want to kind of like block off the other side for now, just so you don't get kind of lost with trying to line up the eyes. So this side's tear duct kind of comes up and out. Again, I drew in that crease of the eyelid first. Now I'm drawing in that eye shape. All right, and I've already decided that I think I'm a little bit off here. I think I've made my eyebrow too low. So this is why we check, because I noticed that as I was about to do that other side that my eye was going to be too small. So I'm going to erase that out. I'm going to shrink up my eyebrow a little bit. I think the top part is fine. It's just that bottom part that I had made a bit too low. All right, so then I need to start over. So it's okay, that's gonna happen, and this is the only way that you're gonna ensure that everything is correct. So I probably actually wouldn't have needed to erase everything, but that's all right. I'm gonna put in that bottom line because that's where I got a little confused last time, because I need to mark in where that shape is. And this is gonna be tricky. This is the hardest part. So shading is gonna take a lot of time, but it's not as difficult. It's getting these proportions correct that really makes or breaks the project. Because let's be honest, if your celebrity doesn't look like your celebrity, then we've kind of missed the mark. All right, so now I'm looking at where the iris starts and stops from. And this is telling me where that black shape is. That will be his eyelashes. And then I can go ahead and put in that iris. All right, so then once you've kind of developed that, and there's not as much information here. The other side was a lot easier because there was less kind of going on here, and over on here I had all this stuff to help frame out his eyes. All right, so now I take off the other line and I'm kind of backing up and looking at my project from up here and just making sure it looks okay. Right now he looks a little bit older than what he actually is. But I promise you that will kind of get smoothed out and made more apparent as we develop our project further. All right, we're almost done for today, but what I do want to do is kind of look at where, sorry if you can hear the dogs in the background. I want to kind of develop where the shadows are for kind of this eye area. So there's a distinct shadow here. So I'm going back and looking at any areas on my project after I get those facial features in that kind of have distinct shadow lines so that I know when I go into shade where things are and where I need to kind of start and stop. You could do this also with your hair. So I am going to go in and go up to like B6, and there's a direction change in B6. So I'm looking at this kind of black void right here in the photo because that's kind of where his hair part is. And so like in box 6 and 7, the hair direction changes this way. So I'm drawing just a few lines to help me with directionality. So I definitely recommend going into the hair area and giving yourself some directionality if you can see the hair, which in most cases you will. It does depend on your celebrity and their photo though. Everybody's hair is going to provide, their own challenges. But the direction of the curves and the way that the hair lays is very important, again, to make it look like that celebrity and really kind of stand out. And then what I am going to do is in box 4, this is where like this big shadow starts. So I'm going to kind of box that off and maybe even just add a touch of shading here so I remember that that's what that is. Over to that side. And I'm going to go back here. I think I made his head a little wonky on this side. I'm going to trim this down. But most of that is going to be done using shading. Okay. So how do we address the beard hair? We don't right now. We kind of wait on that. I know it's tempting and it's kind of tricky because it just looks like it's a little more undone than everything else. But I promise it's going to be better if we just address that with the shading pencil later. So I'm going to kind of box in this shadow over here and make sure that that doesn't get forgotten, just like I've been doing over on this side as well. All right, I feel pretty good about where I am with the project. I would maybe want to mark in any other distinct shadows that I notice, like there's one down here for his neck, and just kind of pencil that in just so you don't forget more than anything. If you wanted to, like for the beard, he does have like a little beauty mark, a mole right here, so I'm going to put that in there. And I am going to kind of lay down the directionality of his beard just a little bit, just as a reminder that there's texture there and I need to not forget it. And that it does, you know, change direction based on the curvature of his face and where it's going. Okay, so the trickiest part actually might be this area right here and developing his nose. And you know what? Now I'm zooming out. I've made his nose way too wide. I don't know why I came this far out in there. So I've made my first mistake that I've caught before I got too far. Look how far out I went from, you know, that cross section. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this all here. I knew something was throwing me off, but I couldn't quite figure it out. I'm going to come back down here. And that seems way more logical. I think I just overdid that shadow area and I just kept going with that shape. There we go. And now he's got like a subtle little shadow here. Connects down to his smile line. All right. I feel a lot better about that than I did prior. And I'm still looking at these shadows in here. I think his nose bothers me the most right now, but as we kind of develop everything, I think we'll feel better about it. And like I said, you can go back up and you could put in your wrinkles or any sort of distinctive line that might exist. Basically, I could just keep on going and going and going, but we are basically ready to start talking about shading. All right, so get your facial features done, get any distinctive lines done that you need, and then make sure you check in with me if you are struggling at all, and I'm happy to give you some pointers. Have a good one.